that they wrote that became forever famous. And the many things that people were talking about him when he was alive, people just stopped talking about those things anymore. Okay, and to add to the, well, the second one is a Su Shi Zheng Liu Jing Wen. It's a scene of winter, but it's a poem that he wrote to his good friend. I've been using Su Shi's poem a lot of times in this class, but the more I learn about him, the more I like him very much. And the more I realize that many people loved him too. In the past, we always think that Li Bai, we all loved Li Bai very much, but he is kind of out of this world. He's in a different universe by himself, which we do not usually go to. But Su Shi is our guide to our lives. He is so personable and optimistic. We just love him, okay? And today I'm going to talk about Matteo Ricci and the cicada. These are two things I picked up during these 2 weeks. Matteo Ricci is because we were talking about the Catholic Church and how the church preached to the world how they are represented and what their goals were. And we like to talk about Matteo Ricci to see how this reflected the Catholic Church. These are the words that we learned the last time that I want to emphasize a little bit more. Spin a little tale, if I may. Let's start with the word deity. We were talking about Greek gods for quite a long time, and lots of times we talk about what they did and their wonderful accomplishments and their very sad love life. Okay, this is the deity. That when we talk about Greek mythology, there are lots of gods, but when it comes to Christianity, there is only one God. But the word God is God in any civilization. When we have one God, it's deity, or as we would call in Latin, Deus. And in Greek mythology or in Chinese legends, there were lots of gods. That's okay with us too. And the word supernatural is beyond nature. So we have Deus, which is Latin for God, but supernatural is above nature, beyond or added to nature. So this is nature, while supernatural is beyond this, or it's not the usual stuff, because usual stuff is natural, but supernatural is not natural. And we talked about lots of paranormal things last time about Seance. Is that the next one? Maybe not yet. Okay, let's talk about Carrie first. Carrie is a novel written by Stephen King. Stephen King is a very popular writer, and he likes to talk about supernatural things. And the first novel he wrote is called Carrie. It's about a teenage girl in high school when people thought she was aloof or lonely or not popular, and she avenged for all these discrimination against her by wreaking havoc. She conjured up all sorts of supernatural things. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we have with, I don't know why this P is here. Okay, it is. Okay, supernatural power. So that's a movie. Maybe you've seen some of his movies. He's very popular. Many of his stories, I mean, Stephen King's stories, were made into movies. And the funny thing is that, like many very successful writers and composers, when they were struggling to succeed, they were rejected by their publishers and the people who, the readers and the whatever. But they still struggled to make their work known. And in this situation, he is not alone. When he wrote his first novel, people, I mean, he could not find anyone to publish his book. And he threw his draft into the trash bin. And his wife, while emptying the trash can, looked through these and thought it was good and encouraged him. Thus, this book was published after he was thrown away as trash and recovered by his wife. That's life with many of the successful writers and composers. Uh, this is what we were talking about last time. We talked about seance. Seance is usually there is a medium, which is a lingmei, who conducts the seance by gathering people around a table, and they pray for God or for the dead person to show up. And this is called a seance. And I last time I mentioned the movie Ghost, which I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's got Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze. And when Patrick Swayze died in the first 5 minutes of the movie, his spirit wandered around trying to communicate with his beloved girlfriend, played by Demi Moore. And he went into a medium's shop. This shop is opened by a person uh, who's supposed to be a medium, but she knew she's a fake one. And she was played by Whoopi Goldberg, a very funny person. And she was doing all these seances in his little shop, in her little shop. And the people would come and ask her to connect to a dead person. So along came this ghost, played by Patrick Swayze. He wanted to be able to communicate with his girlfriend, but he's dead. So he showed up in this shop with Whoopi Goldberg, and the Whoopi Goldberg was just flabbergasted because even though she was doing the seances every day, she knew in her heart that she was cheating because there's no such thing. And along came this real ghost. Oh, how happy she is now because she was really able to communicate with this real ghost. And the rest of the story you have seen in the movie. Okay. Uh, there's another thing about seance, about Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini is a magician early in 20th century and the late 19th century. Okay, he was born in 1874. So most of his magical tricks were on stage in the early part of 20th century, not in the late 19th. But at that time, there were more than one, that is more than Houdini, who are very much against these so-called mediums conducting seances because they knew those were not real. They were just cheating the public. So he, again and again in his shows, he would we would say 拆穿那些人的假戏哈。So he would, like in this poster, it says, "Do spirits return?" It's a Houdini poster. It says, Houdini says no and proves it. So in his magic show, he would prove that the so-called ghosts or seances were a hoax. Hoax. Okay. Hoax is a hoax. Something that is a cheat. Great. It's a false claim and a false show that is to cheat the public that these things do happen, but they were a hoax. Okay. For example, there was once a writer. He wrote a story about Howard Hughes. And Howard Hughes is a very wealthy person. People wanted to know all about him, but he's a recluse. He he lives in a Las Vegas hotel, and he never talked to any press or reporters or whatever. So this writer just made up a story of his interviews with Howard Hughes, because Howard Hughes is never going to tell the public that this is not true, because Howard Hughes never talked to anyone in public. But it turns out to be a hoax. And I think it's probably Newsweek or Time magazine, 拆穿他的假话. So this is the word we call hoax, which means something that is made up in order to cheat somebody or the public. And Harry Houdini is in the magic business. He does magics, and many of his shows deals with the ghost being a hoax. Okay. And what kind of magician is Houdini? Houdini is one of the very, very famous persons. So if you want to know anything about, if you talk about anything that's popular in this country, you have to know Houdini. Harry Houdini is an Italian. His parents were Italian. He's an immigrant, either first generation or second generation immigrant. And he's an escape artist, which means that he does the magic trick, which involves being locked up or somehow tied up or something. But he would show people how he would be able to escape. So he could be in chains or in a box or in all sorts of things that would lock him in. And sometimes they would throw the box into the water, the river or something, or they would chain him up and put him in the big milk jar with water in it. And he would, within a reasonable time, he would emerge free of all those chains. So that's why he is called an escape artist. Or he is an illusionist. It is that a person who creates illusion, things that you don't really see, but you thought you see. That's called an illusionist. And a stunt performer. Stunt is 特技表演, huh? So he does very difficult acrobatic activities, which people just love to see. Huh? So he became very, very famous because of all these things that are so skillfully done. People just couldn't believe any human being could be in the water for even for hours, and suddenly he would come out free of the chains. That's how he is a very famous magician. Then here's a picture of him in chains. He is wearing very little with lots of chains and locks all around with arms and legs and the body entirely locked in chains. And he would then be thrown into the river or submerged into a large box on stage. And then in time he would emerge. And he, of course, he has the ability to hold his breath for a very long time, much longer than any of us. And of course, even if we could just hold our breath for hours or infinitely, we still could not do what he does, which is to be able to get rid of all the locks and the chains and emerge free of those chains. He first appeared in vaudeville. I'm going to talk about this word a minute later. It's called vaudeville. Vaudeville, in our Chinese, we would probably say it's a 杂耍 or 综艺节目. But in the old days before TV, this is usually a group of artists, we call artists, people who are skilled in different ways. And they would usually do a stage show in the city, or they would travel from town to town. It's like a circus, but not based on animal shows, but based on people of different talents. And Harry Houdini would be in the vaudeville show, and later became a tour in Europe, and he became an American magician or vaudevillian who performs under the title that Harry Handcuff Houdini. So his name is by birth Harry Houdini, I guess, maybe not. It's the Harry part is probably anglicized. That is, he usually, I imagine I could easily look it up, but I did not. His name is Houdini, and that is Italian. So he may have a not very common first name, but he chose to be called Harry. So we say that his name is anglicized. That is, this name is similar to an English name. Like Barack Obama, for a time he wanted to assimilate. His first name Barack, he put it away, and he tell people to call him Barry. So he's Barry Obama, and Barry is his anglicized first name. Let me put this here. Anglicized. Anglicize is to change into English. So many immigrants like us, we came to this country and we realized that people couldn't pronounce our names. So we would choose an English name. We could be called Mary or John or whatever, so that our American English speaking friends would find no trouble pronouncing our names. I was talking about Harry Houdini. I have to look into that to see if he has an original name. But on his poster that advertised his magic shows, he is called Harry Handcuff Houdini, because he always have handcuffs on, 手铐. Here I have one single slice here about his name, Harry Handcuff Houdini. And these three words are all starting with the letter H. This is called alliteration, and I mentioned this before. When you talk about poem, you would rhyme. This is the word rhyme. And rhyme usually means the last syllable, and it usually means the vowel instead of the consonant. So we have consonants. When we talk about alphabet, we have consonants and we have vowels. So these are 子音 and these are 母音 When we talk about rhyme, we usually means rhyming with the vowels. But when we talk about alliteration, it means we're rhyming with consonants. We are rhyming with H, H, H in this case. So alliteration means initial rhyme, which means you're rhyming with the first sound that you make of this word, which is usually not a vowel, and it's usually a consonant, or it's called the head rhyme. So in Chinese, it's called the head rhyme. 头韵, huh? 头韵 is, I last time when I talked about it, I mentioned the Pete Piper picked a pickle of pickled pepper, I guess so. Yeah, that's one ditty, huh? Ditty is like a 打油诗, huh? A ditty. Or a doggerel. Doggerel. I don't know. It cannot be right. Okay, Tucci. Okay. So these are the word ditty or doggerel are called 打油诗, which is not a very well written literary work, but people can read and recite it easily because it's not complicated. Okay, so so the one that I just mentioned, Pete Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper. Yeah, that's a 打油诗 because it's not really elegant or inspiring or whatever, but it's a little ditty or a doggerel, and that is entire ditty is made of alliteration. Is each word starts with a P letter. Huh? Here we call Harry Houdini Harry handcuff Houdini because it gives a good punch when you read his name with three H's in every word. One H for every word. Okay, so let's go back to this Houdini. He became a famous escape artist. What does he do? He would do his repertoire. Is an artist has a repertoire, which means he is famous for doing these things, whether it's a singer or an actor or a magician or a chorus or a dance troupe or whatever. When they perform, they have a set of program that they are famous for. They do it very well. That's called his repertoire. Huh? So his repertoire includes chains, that is iron chains, or ropes slung from skyscrapers, 绳子和挂在摩天大楼上哈。Straight jackets is a very tight jacket that when you put it on, you could not move. Okay, that's called a straight jacket. Sometimes people use straight jacket to confine the mental patients in the mental hospital. When the person is crazy, they would put a straight jacket on this person so he is not able to make any mischiefs. And Harry Houdini would let people put straight jackets on him underwater, and he has to escape from whatever he was in and hold his breath inside a sealed milk can with water in it. So he's doing all that kind of things. The most common you can still see on YouTube is probably a big, large container with water, and they put him in chains and throw him in the water, and then people in front of the stage would just wait and wait and wait, and eventually he would come out without chains. That is quite some fantastic skill. He actually died rather young. It's like 26, so it's 52 years. So it's not, he did not die of old age. It was one day he was sick and he also broke his leg. So he was lying on the couch in the room, and there was a young student who wants to show that he is a strong and young man and so on. He just came to Harry Houdini and punched him in the stomach. And at that time, Harry Houdini had appendicitis. I guess that's a word. Does anybody know? 盲肠炎, huh? He already had that problem, but nobody knew, including himself. He did not know that he had appendicitis. I don't know. You can look it up. Okay. So he was sick and he was punched in the stomach by this young man. It's almost, was Bruce Lee having a similar experience? Because they are strong in many ways, and they claim that they are so strong that you could just punch him in the stomach and it'll be all right. However, they have to be prepared for it. If you just sneak up to him and punch him, he was not ready to receive that punch. And of course, at that time, he broke his leg and he had appendicitis. So he was in no position to receive such a punch, and he was supposed to go on stage to perform, and he was in a bad shape. But he still went up stage and did the performance, and he died the next day. So that's how a sad story it was when a very skilled and capable person died at the hand of this young college student hand who knew nothing better. Okay, this is Harry Houdini. Then as I promised, I would go back to the word vaudeville. A show that is called a vaudeville include all these things in the second bullet, under the second bullet. There are popular and classical musicians. So some people would be able to play piano or violin or whatever instrument, either popular songs or classical songs. And they would sing and dance. So they are singers and dancers, comedians, or clowns. Clowns are here, okay, comedians, and the trained animals. So instead of having elephants and lions, tigers, they would probably have a snake or a dog or something smaller to do some kind of trained animal shows, or do magic show, to do magics. And the ventriloquist, which is a harder word, ventriloquist is 腹语术, somebody who, like Edgar Bergen, yeah, I think his name is Edgar Bergen. He's the father of Candice Bergen, and he was the most famous ventriloquist in United States. Candice, yes? Okay, I thought I heard somebody say something. So ventriloquist means that you could pronounce something in your chest. So this person would be able to speak through his usual voice. He has a vocal cord and the mouth and tongue and so on. He could speak just like anyone else. However, he would also make another speech by using his stomach. I don't know what he used, but people would just hear him speaking something, but his mouth is not moving. Actually, it's actually still in his mouth, but he tried to hold his mouth as still as possible. So you look at him and you do not see him moving his mouth or tongues, but actually he's making another voice heard. So people say he's a ventriloquist, but he's actually using his whole mouth and things like that, but you couldn't see. So this person would be performing two ways, his usual voice and this ventriloquist sound, whatever it is called. And he would usually have a dummy in his hand. He would hold a puppet in his hand, and this puppet would be facing him, and they would carry on a conversation. He would say something, and this dummy would say something, which was actually pronounced by himself. So, like Edgar Bergen, he would say, "How are you?" And this dummy would respond, "Oh, yeah, I'm very sad," and so on and so forth. If you have ever watched something, I'm sure it's also on YouTube, about Candice Bergen, who is a very famous actress. When Candice Bergen was in her first movie, he went to Taiwan to the film, The Sand Pebbles. The Sand Pebbles was by Robert Weiss, I think. That movie was filmed on location in Taiwan instead of on Yangtze River, because at that time nobody could go to film a foreign film in China. So at that time, Candice Bergen went to Taiwan, and I or you were probably in college at the time. So she is about our age, and maybe a little younger, because she was probably 16 or 17, while I was maybe 19 or something. I was talking about his father, her father, okay. Candice Bergen was a very beautiful young woman at that time, but later she became a famous actress. That was her first film, The Sand Pebbles, with Steve McQueen and Richard Attenborough. Yeah, okay. So I was talking about Candice Bergen being interviewed about her upbringing, how she grew up with a very famous father who is a ventriloquist, and she became very jealous of that dummy, this puppet in her father's hand, because her father and this dummy were world famous. Everywhere people went, they just adored his father and the puppet, while she was alone at home with her mother. So she was very jealous of that dummy. Okay, the dummy is a puppet. Okay, so ventriloquist is one of the artists in a vaudeville show. A strongman is a big muscular man who could lift heavy things and do something that people want to see. A female or a male impersonator is someone who impersonate another person. For example, if you watch Saturday Night Live, you would see lots of impersonators. For example, Alec Baldwin would play Donald Trump. He pretends to be Donald Trump, and he was made up in that shape, and he would talk about things and pretend to be Donald Trump. That's called an impersonator. So if you go on Saturday Night Live, you can see lots of such things, and many comedians could impersonate and make people laugh. Yeah. Okay. Acrobats is physical skills. For example, you could ride on the unicycle, the cycle with one wheel, and you could maybe throw discs and plates and so on. The very hard to accomplish physical acts. In the vaudeville show, it will be performed by acrobats. Clowns 就是小丑了哈。Jugglers, they throw things around. They throw, for example, you can throw 2 balls and 3 balls. And you can throw 7 balls. You can throw many, many balls. And you can throw other things, for example, a running chainsaw. Things that are very hard to catch, but people who are good jugglers, they can do that. Okay, in our area around Christmas, we always have the brothers Karamazov to do juggling shows here in Seattle. One act plays, sometimes they would have a one act play. So it's a very short stage play having only one act, 就是独幕剧, or they would take one scene from a famous long play, but only play this one scene. Athletes, yeah, for example, I've been to Radio City, and they happen to have this young girl doing this trampoline, okay, and she was an Olympic, she competed in the Olympic Games to, and won probably a gold medal, I think. So really good, famous athletes can be in the vaudeville show. Nowadays, it could be ice skaters could do that too, yeah. And the lecturing celebrities, that means people who give lectures, because so many people wanted to see them perform that they are doing touring shows. They are very popular. For example, Charles Dickens, who wrote David Copperfield and Oliver Twist and such Victorian novels, he was very successful with his lecturing shows. He did tours in America, going from city to city, performing by reading his stories or being interviewed and such things. But of course, if you're that famous, like Charles Dickens, you don't go to an everyday vaudeville show. These are more secondary level of performers compared to Charles Dickens, who's way up there, okay? Minstrel shows, we talked about that too. It is white people pretending to be black. They would paint their face black, and they would play as a ignorant, stupid black person as a clown. Okay, so these shows are called minstrel shows in America only. It doesn't exist in any other place. But of course, nowadays they cannot be shown anymore because that is really, really racially discriminating to Black people, to poke fun by portraying them as stupid and ignorant. And sometimes they would show some short movies too, huh? So all these performances are part of the standard vaudeville show. And the person who performs in a vaudeville show would be called a vaudevillian. Here is a word, vaudevillian, okay? And here is a poster for a vaudeville show, and you can see, well, I should not say that. It's called the Sando. That's the name of the show. But at the bottom, it's in French. It says Trocadero Vaudevilles. So the word vaudeville is from French. And this word Trocadero is an area behind the Eiffel Tower. You have Eiffel Tower, and you have Ballet Charlotte, I guess. So the area behind it is called the Trocadero, where the, I was going to say the Rodin, yes, Rodin. Rodin is a sculpturist, 法国的雕刻的师哈. He has a museum, a Rodin museum, right in the area of Trocadero. So that's in Paris. So this is a show poster advertising a vaudeville show. And you can see there are the trapeze like this. 就是空中飞人, and this is a minstrel show probably. And there are clowns and the ballet dancers and dog. There's another dog and so on. There's a musician. This is kind of like an accordion or concertina, 就是叫什么手风琴啊. This is a simple one, but the very big one you can see like that big. That's more complicated. And because it goes this way and that way, we say some of the razor the wire fence. It was put into rows and you can stretch it out. 我们叫做 barbed wire 哈 ，barbed 就是说这个 wire 铁丝上面有刺的哈，所以这个就是有刺的。But when it's in a row, we call that a concertina barbed wire 哈。This is what a concertina would look like. Here we're going to talk about 碟仙哈. This is the English version of Ouija board. In Chinese, it's way more complicated, but in English, it's very easy. You only have 26 letters. And what is a Ouija board? It is like this. In Chinese, you would have hundreds of words all around this circle. And people would put their fingers on this little thing, which is called the planchette. You don't have to learn that. People who participate in this game would sit around the table with the board on it, and they each would put a finger on top of this little dish, inverted dish, 反过来的一个小碟子. So you would be like this, each one has a finger on it, and because each person was exerting their strength or force differently, pretty soon the dish, the saucer started to move around on its own will because you didn't push it this way, but someone else did. So this saucer is moving around. So this one is a Chinese version, but if you look at an English version, it's much simpler with 26 letters and the numbers 1 to 0, 10 numbers. And here we have yes and no. And here we have goodbye. When the game is over, the ghost would say goodbye and the game is over. So this is called either a Ouija board or a Ouija board. However, it's spelled like a we. This part is we, but this jar is usually pronounced as j or g. So it can be Ouija or Ouija. This is a 碟仙, Ouija board. It is supposed to be a board that's controlled either by a ghost or a god or some kind of supernatural being. And the people who participate would each put a finger on the piece of thing that is called the planchette. Here, you don't have to learn this word. So this is a movable indicator. This thing would be pushed by all these people going this way or that way. And every time it stops on the letter, you write that letter down. And then pretty soon you will be able to write words, spell words or sentences as if a ghost was speaking. It is quite obvious that it's a hoax, but some people believe in that, okay? Participants place their fingers on the planchette and it moves around to spell out words. People who believe in it say that the dead people is right there in the room, directing people's direction, directing people to move that little saucer in order to communicate with us. Okay, so that's called 碟仙. I myself have never done that before, but I know that when I was in school, some people brought something and some of us would gather around after class and play that. but somehow I was never part of that. Okay, so compared to the English version, this Chinese thing is just way more difficult. However, every time it stops at a word, it's quite clear that it says this word or that word. While the English version, you would have a hard time spelling out the word in the correct alphabetical order and so on. So maybe this is easier. I don't know. Okay. Now the next word is a stimulus. Stimulus is something that caused something else to behave in a certain way. 是一种东西能够刺激到别的东西，使得它发生一个反应。Something external, meaning it's outside your body, outside everybody's body. There is something that elicits or influences a physiological or psychological activity or response. So this thing would cause people to physically or mentally do something because of this stimulus. It could be, for example, an electric shock. Okay, so people would put an electric shock on somebody, and you would have a response like this. Without it, such a response would not happen. And sometimes the response is not physical, but psychological. Maybe you listen to a screeching sound and it makes you shudder or something, or you go crazy because of something. These are all called the stimulus, and the plural form for stimulus is stimuli. Here, 就是把这个 US is changed to I in order to show that word as a plural. Plural 就是多数的意思哈。And this was also part of what we were talking about last time. We talked about the stimulus and we talked about the hypnosis. Hypnosis is to cause somebody to fall asleep. Usually we know that the hypnotist would hold on to a 怀表, a pocket watch, 就是一个怀表，就是放在你口袋里的. And they would swing this in front of the patient, and the thing would go this way and that way. And the patient is supposed to follow this watch, and pretty soon the hypnotist would say, you are very sleepy, you're going to fall asleep, and so on and so forth. And this person who was following with his eyes would just fall asleep. That's called the hypnosis. Hypnosis is something that happens to a person who appears to be in a trance-like state. That is, when you poke him or talk to him, there's no response because he is in a trance. We talked about the word trance, which is a state of not being aware of things. But this is not because he is too drunk or not because he was sleepy and fell asleep. It is because someone else artificially induced it. 这个才叫催眠哈，催的意思是 caused by someone else. So it's artificially induced, in which a person has a heightened suggestibility. During this period that you were being hypnotized, people would be able to tell you to do things you would follow easily without resistance. For example, you would be told to jump off a cliff. Usually, if you are quite awake, you would not jump off a cliff. 跳下一个悬崖. But when you're under hypnosis, and when the person who made you fall asleep ordered you to this and that, then you would usually just follow his instruction without hesitation. So this is called with a heightened suggestibility, which means you are easily being suggested. You would follow the suggested direction and do things easily without thinking because you're not thinking, in which suppressed memories may be experienced. And a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I don't know quite well what the difference they are, the psychologist or the hypnotist who does the hypnosis with a purpose. What's his purpose? He is trying to release your suppressed memory. Now, there are people who experience really tough times when they were a child. For example, they were molested sexually, or they were, anyway, or they were bombed during the war. They went through very tough times. So when they grow up, they could not deal with this traumatic experience in their mind. So they try to forget it. They are in denial and they forget about what happened. But the psychiatrist or the hypnotist would put them in a trance under hypnosis and ask them questions. What happened? What did your father do? What did your uncle do to you? And so on and so forth. And a person under hypnosis would easily, I wouldn't say easily, would sometimes divulge what actually happened to their life. But they had never told anyone else, even themselves. They forgot about it, but under hypnosis, they were able to speak out and to tell the hypnotist what really happened in the past. These are some of the tricks that magicians can perform, and also some psychiatrists could perform in order to find out what was really wrong about a person by finding out what really happened in his or her life when he was younger, which he may not even remember. This is what we call suppressed memories. So this word hypnotize, hypnosis, hypnotize is a verb and hypnotic is an adjective. And the thing that you do to hypnotize a person is called hypnotism. And the person who performs it is a hypnotist. Okay. Our next subject is Sino-Japanese War. In our history, we talked about 甲午战争 and the 八年抗战. And the last time when I mentioned it, I told you that other people in other countries, they do not call them 甲午战争 or 八年抗战. They call them the first Sino-Japanese War or the second Sino-Japanese War. And the first one, which we call 甲午战争, happened between 1894 and 1895. And of course, China lost to Japan, and they signed a treaty called 马关条约. And I don't know why it's called the Treaty of Shimonoseki. Apparently, that's what 马关 is called, but I don't know this Japanese word. I know ma is usually called the uma, but here there's no word about a real horse. Maybe it's about a different thing. But the second Sino-Japanese War, some people think it started in 1931. And what happened in 1931 was in Manchuria. Japan first decided that they wanted China, all all of China, but the first step would be to take over Manchuria. So they first invaded 就是进攻哈. They first invaded Manchuria. At that time, Manchuria was occupied by Zhang Zuolin, a warlord of Manchuria, whose son is Zhang Xueliang. Huh? So you probably can see it on YouTube. There's a TV series called the Shao Shuai. Huh? Shao Shuai is the son of the marshal, and it's Zhang Xueliang, and his father is Zhang Zuolin. Huh? So when Japan wanted to invade Manchuria, first they want to do away with Zhang Zuolin, the warlord of Manchuria. So they created a fake incident, which is called the Mugden incident, 皇姑屯事件, huh? Mugden. The Japanese army, they sent a special group of people who blew up the railroad track near Mugden. And I'm not very clear about what happened. So they used that excuse to invade China by pretending that the security of Manchuria is in danger because bad people are all over the place and they blew up the railway track. But in fact, the Japanese they blew up the tracks, but they say Manchuria is not safe. And so they invaded Manchuria and they succeeded, okay? Actually, Zhang Zuolin was killed in the railway train, I guess so. So his son, Shao Shuai, Zhang Xueliang, is supposed to inherit the kingdom, if you can call that a kingdom, but it's just one of the Junfa. And Zhang Xueliang eventually went on to do Xi'an Shibian. Huh? He kidnapped Chiang Kai-shek to Xi'an and forced him to make peace with Mao Zedong because he, having his father killed by the Japanese, really wanted China to declare war with Japan. China was really inferior in many ways to Japan. So Chiang Kai-shek was reluctant to declare war because there's no way he's going to win this war. But Zhang Xueliang, being the son of the warlord who was killed by the Japanese, he really wanted Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong to make peace so that they could join force and fight against the Japanese. That was in, I don't know, sometime between 1937, but sometime after 1931. Yeah, the funny thing is that my mother and I, we went to Xi'an Shibian 博物馆, the museum of Xi'an incident. And we were standing there with a girl who was supposed to be the tour guide or docent at the museum. And she stood in front of a big mural and explained to all these things. And she said, oh, what Japanese did and what happened to this and that and that. And the rape of Nanking. With all these things, China could not tolerate anymore and declare the war against China. So my mother said, no. The rape of Nanking happened after the declaration of war. And the girl was embarrassed and she didn't know much. And she just know the script. She memorized the whole thing. And my mother just stood her up. she stood there. She couldn't continue because it was interrupted. Her whole story was gone. She did not know what to say after that. She just stood there. That was one funny thing that happened to us when we went to Xi'an and visited the museum of Xi'an incident. So we know that first we had the invasion of Manchuria in 1931. And then we had that Xi'an incident. And then we had the declaration of war after Lugouqiao 事变, July 7th. We called it Lugouqiao. However, other people do not know what Lugouqiao means. As far as they know, the war between China and Japan started at Marco Polo Bridge. You know, you all know Marco Polo, who was an Italian or Venetian merchant who came to China in Yuan Dynasty as a trader. And that's the famous Marco Polo. And this wonderful, beautiful old stone bridge outside Beijing is called Marco Polo Bridge. But in China, we call it Lugouqiao. So we started 8 years of war against Japan. And this war lasted 1937 to 1945. However, in the West, people would say the World War II, but that's not the same thing as our 8 year of the Sino-Japanese War. World War II in Europe started in 1939, 2 years later, and it started because Nazi Germany, Hitler, invaded Poland. That's when, they did first to Czechoslovakia. However, the West just swallowed it. They decided to acquiesce, which means 妥协. Western Europe, in the face of Nazi invasion, first they let Hitler annexed Austria, 奥地利，他先把它吞并了。Then Germany invaded Prague or invaded Czechoslovakia. And Lord Chamberlain in the UK decided not to speak up. They will just let Germany have their way. But then Germany, of course, they're not going to say, okay, so you gave me Czechoslovakia. That's very nice of you. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. No, that's not how it's going to work. So they invaded Poland. And that was in 1939. And Western Europe was all in turmoil. Of course, France and the UK both declared war against Germany within days, probably. They invaded on August 31st or something. And they declared war probably September the 4th or 3rd or something. Within days, they declared war, and World War II, or the Second World War, started in 1939. However, America's not part of it. They did not declare war against Germany nor against Japan. They were just on the sideline. To the Americans, World War II happened in Asia first, when Pearl Harbor was bombed by Japan. So America was heavily involved in supporting European, like France, England, and many other countries in World War II, but they did not declare war against Germany, but they had to declare war against Japan first. So for America, their World War II happened in 1941. And then, since they're in it already, and Japan started to invade all the way down, and they had an alliance with Germany and Italy. So America finally, reluctantly, joined the European War as well. So these are all the dates of these confrontation, and it's kind of complicated. Okay. The next one is called the Petri dish. Last time I could not come up with the word Petri dish. The Chinese word is called Pei Yang Min. You have a little glass saucer with the side raised, 高高的边，中间是平的. It's flat inside. And usually you would put, I said, agar agar. Sometimes you say agar-based growth medium. We just learned the word medium, which is a 灵媒. She or he acts between the ghost or the god and the ordinary people in the store, in his or her store. These people attended a seance, and he or she is a medium so that the supernatural could communicate with the regular people. And here we have a petri dish in which we put agar in the dish so that when you put in germs or whatever you want to grow, they will have the nourishment, 这个营养，所以叫做培养皿哈。The agar in this petri dish is to nourish the germ or whatever you want to grow. Last time we were talking about penicillium. When you grow that into a large quantity, you could refine it into some essence, which is an antibiotic called the penicillin. So all these things were discussed last time, and now we're talking about the petri dish. Why is it called the petri dish? Is because the person, the German scientist, the German bacteriologist, whose name is Julius Petri, first invented this kind of. Yeah, it's not really an invention, It's not like inventing a tape recorder or a computer or a TV set. He just invented a way to perform experiments in the lab by using round, flat-bottomed glass dishes so that you can observe things, you can grow things in it, which are very tiny. So you need a small thing to hold it. So this is called a petri dish. Then we continue to talk about the alloy or alloy. Either way is correct. A-L-L-O-Y. It's this word. Bronze is one of the very oldest alloy that human being invented. They digged from the ground, or they mined from the ground, copper, gold, iron, and things like that. And one of the things, they did something that's more than just using this metal straight out of the mine, is to make an alloy out of it. And the first alloy human being made, it was true in many areas. They did not talk to each other on internet. They just did it simultaneously on their own. It was called bronze, 就是青铜, Bronze is an alloy made with adding tin to copper. Copper is the major ingredient in this thing. People use 7/8 of the material by using copper. 7/7的这个产品都是铜but they add 1/8, 就是1%的是 tin. Tin 是锡吧here I have this xin. Tin is xi. On the periodic table, it is called SN, and it's the number is 50. So we have tin added to copper to make bronze. And why do we do that? The very creative human being, they found that by adding a little of tin in copper, they could change the property of this new product. There are various ways you do alloy, because you have other goals. You want this thing to become more soft or more elastic or more stronger or shinier or conduct electricity better. So for various reasons, you add another metal into a major pot of metal and mix it together. And the people all over the world decided this is the first alloy we're going to make. That is to add tin to copper to make bronze. And in China, we have in Shang Dynasty and Zhou Dynasty, things like this tripod I have on the right-hand side of the computer of this PowerPoint. This is a bronze tripod. Tripod means a vessel having three parts, meaning three legs. Not necessarily a vessel. In this case, it is a one big container. Maybe you can put water in it, you can put incense in it, or you can put food in it, for whatever reason. But originally in China, this is for big ceremonies, some kind of a national or royal ceremonies, and they would use such a pot. And of course, there are other tripods later. So as early as 3000 BC, that is 5,000 years ago, people invented this. It's not only in China, it's also in Mesopotamia, which is Lianghe Liuyu. The area between two rivers is called the Meso, which means middle, Potamia, which means river. Mesopotamia is Lianghe Liuyu, and the people there also invented bronze by mixing these two metals. And they did not talk to any Chinese about it. So this is tin, which in Chinese is called xi, and on the periodical table as number 50. Periodic table is 周期表. When you study chemistry, you should better memorize most of your periodical table. And in another case about tin is a tin can. In this case, we did not add the tin mixed in iron, but we make an iron can, but we coated, or we say we plated. When we plate when we coat some metallic thing with another thing, we call it plated. So it is tin plated. We plate the iron can, or we coated it with tin so that it does not rust. If the can of food the can itself is made of iron only, then it starts to rust. And pretty soon it cannot stay on the shelf for very long. Pretty soon it's going to leak. The food would come out. So people invented the thing called the tin can. Tin can is the word. It is a can that is plated with tin, and it's used for keeping food in it. To me, it's a rather advanced technology in human history. That is one giant step, the invention of a tin can, because now you don't have to starve in the winter. You can keep food in cans for extended long period of time. But this tin plate is not an alloy. Here is a term that people like to say, which is kick the can down the road. What does it mean? It is that something that happens that you should really deal with it. For example, your roof is leaking or something broke and you have to fix it or whatever. But most people, as we human beings are, we would kick the can down the road. So this can is blocking your way, but you don't deal with it. You don't pick it up. You just kick it away. And then a little later, you will come across it again. So this is to say that do not deal with something that you really need to take care of. That's, we say, you just kick the can down the road. In the real word, you could say procrastinate. Procrastinate. And the verb is procrastinate, and the noun would be procrastination, 就是千言不做事. We all have this such times. For example, the teacher says, we're going to give you a quiz next Monday, and everybody should start to study. But you say, it's Monday, I'm not going to do it now. I procrastinated, or I kicked the can down the road. And tomorrow, the weather is so nice, I want to do something else. And you procrastinated, you kick the can down the road, okay? Here's another thing that we use tin with. It's called a pewter. If you go to Germany and you drink beer, and you would buy a beer mug made of pewter. A pewter is an alloy, mostly made of tin, but with a very small portion of lead. So it's not that shiny like tin, but it has some other good things. For example, they make carvings on it so it would be beautiful, while tin may not be able to hold the carving together. Each alloy has its purpose, and the different proportion of the mix would make a different attribute to this alloy. Pewter is often made into, say, beer mugs, but often in flatware, cutlery. Flatware is probably dishes because they're flat, and cutlery is your knife and fork used in eating food. So all these things were made for people to eat food with. And this was invented also very early, during the Bronze Age. And here I have another movie. This is called A Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. It has Elizabeth Taylor, Paul Newman, and the father was played by Bill Ives, who is a jazz trumpet player. But he was pretty good in many movies, like the Gregory Peck movie, The Big Earth. The Big Earth. I guess it's called The Big Earth, or The Great Land. I think it's called The Big Earth. Anyway, this is called Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. It was turned into a movie. It was a play written by Tennessee Williams. Tennessee Williams was one of several writers born in the United States who won Nobel Prize in Literature. He was not the first and not the last. And he wrote mainly plays such as Suddenly Last Summer, or The Glass Menagerie, 玻璃动物园, and A Streetcar Named Desire, 欲望街车. He was very good and very famous. And The Crucible, no, not The Crucible, I'm sorry. I'm just talking about Tennessee Williams. Okay. The film stars Elizabeth Taylor, Paul Newman, and Bill Livets. Okay. It is about a young man, a dashing young man, but he's gay, so he did not tell his wife about it. And of course, Tennessee Williams was gay by himself, was gay, and he also wrote Suddenly Last Summer, which featured Montgomery Clift, who was also gay. Yeah, in those times, we knew some people were gay, but they do not advertise about it. They do not come out of the closet. It's called come out. The next alloy is huangtong, brass. Brass is made of copper and zinc. And here it didn't say how the proportion was done. And it says in different proportion depending on how you want it. So you would use mainly copper, but with some zinc, either a lot or a little less, depending on your purpose. Here it says achieve varying mechanical and electrical properties. By electrical, it means how fast, how well it conducts electricity through the wire. Okay, so if you open an electric cord and you see the bronze color inside, it could be brass because this is you want it to be conducted in a certain way. The third one is called zinc. Zinc is Z. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. This is the second one called the zinc. The third one is this one, nickel. The zinc is Z30. It's called the Xin. When we talked about Elizabeth Taylor movie, it's called A Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. So the roof was made of hot tin roof, meaning this roof was probably made of iron and coated with tin. But with zinc, it's not a hot tin roof. It is a zinc coated plate. So this is called, we have a special word for it, called galvanized. So when we say galvanized, we mean that an iron plate or maybe a wavy one, it was dipped in hot zinc. It becomes galvanized, so it does not rot or rust. 镀锌铁板, that's a major use of zinc. So it is used at least in two ways we know. One is to make galvanized sheets, that is plating or dip. You dip it in zinc. That's not an alloy. While the brass is an alloy of copper and zinc. Okay. On the other hand, zinc is also something very, very important for human being. It's an essential mineral. We cannot function well without zinc. That's why sometimes we would take some supplement like zinc tablets or zinc lozenges or airborne tablets for vitamin C with zinc. So you would take some zinc occasionally to supplement your body. Otherwise, something would happen. You would not be very healthy. You would not function well, especially for women prenatal or postnatal. So before childbirth or after childbirth, the woman should ingest or take some zinc in order to keep themselves and the baby healthy. And the zinc deficiency, meaning 缺乏锌的话, if you are short of zinc in your body, then you're not very healthy. There are 2 billion people in the world, in the developing world, that have this kind of zinc deficiency as a problem with the function of their body. I don't know what kind of food is in there for you to make this correction. And it's associated with many diseases. But now we know you can go to a supplements store to buy zinc supplements. And the third one is nickel. Nickel is nie. Is usually we call 5-cent piece of coin nickel because it used nickel, the element nickel, when they make this 5-cent coin. And in Chinese, we would call that coin a nie bi, huh? And in United States, now if you get a nickel out, you would see probably Thomas Jefferson on one side. And on the other side, you would see a building. I forgot what that building is, one of our buildings in Washington, D.C. But in the old days, that is probably before 1940s, you have buffalo nickels. They have an Indian head on one side, and on the other side, you have a buffalo. And at the bottom of the buffalo, you would see 5 cents. That's what's called a nickel. So when I was in this country earlier, I arrived in 1969. And in the beginning, I would come across buffalo nickels quite often, not all the time, but if you come across with 1,000 of them, you would certainly come across 1 or 2 buffalo nickels. And at that time, I kept a few, but I don't know where they are now. Because as days go by, as time goes by, it becomes rarer and rarer, and it'll become more valuable. And on internet, you can see people selling you buffalo nickels that are made of 0.9999 silver. So it's not the original buffalo nickel because it has no copper, no nickel, no nothing. It was, I don't know, it was real nickel, but now you can buy this precious coin of buffalo nickel made of almost pure silver. Here we have a group of words that we learned that are connected to death penalty. When somebody is on death penalty, that means they were given a death penalty, they were sentenced to death, and they are on death row. They were a row of people waiting to be executed. So the word is execute. That means the government killing those criminals by executing them. This word is also quite common in business. It has nothing to do with that. Execute. That in business you could have a plan and you would execute this plan. 就是执行这个计划. And if somebody died, in their will, they would assign somebody who would take care of dealing with what's the properties that were left by this dead person. And this person who does the job is an executor, T-O-R. That is a person who execute or execute. Anyway, when it comes to a legal word, you pronounce it differently. You don't say an executor, you say an executor. And we have words as follows: indict, which means 起诉. So, for example, the police caught somebody who probably did this criminal act, so they indict this person so that there will be a formal action in court to discuss this matter. And sometimes there would be a grand jury assigned, which is not our regular jury. A grand jury would be established to consider the case and to decide whether to indict this person or not. And after the person is indicted, there's a legal lawsuit, there's a procession with trials and so on and so forth. And when it's all over, this person is convicted if the judge ruled that, yes, indeed, he should be responsible for this. This is called a conviction, 就是判决了. And the verdict is the decision made by the judge that decided the case. It's called a verdict. And the plaintiff would be the person who goes to court to file a suit against another person for wrongdoing, while the other person would be the defendant. So 被告, The defendant is the accused person who is supposedly have done something wrong. But of course, we don't say somebody who's a defendant is a criminal, because he has to be proved wrong in order to be called a criminal. That's why we, in the American society, people never say this one is a criminal until everything, the court procedure went through and he was decided by the judge or the jury that he was guilty. But in Taiwan or in China, we almost don't have that kind of reservation. We saw this guy killing the other person. He is a criminal. He is guilty. He is whatever. But in America, you are always innocent until proven guilty. That is the law. That's called the due process. I can do that here, a due process. Where were we? Plaintiff and defendant and victim and the perpetrator. A victim is the person who was hurt by this thing. And the perpetrator is a person who did the wrong thing on the victim. Absolve is to waive this guilty either feeling or ruling or whatever, but absolve is less formal than the word exonerate, which is the next one. Exonerate is more formal. You go through certain legal process in order to present your case or your evidence in order to exonerate somebody, while absolve could be I'm sorry, I keep saying the wrong word. Okay, absolve is to forgive somebody. Forgive is even less formal. Now we go to the next word, which is yarrow. I'm not going to talk much about it. It is
Yes? 你是不是应该要休息一下？你都一直坐着也没喝水。
Okay, I've been thinking about that too. But when we come to the song, I'm going to rest. Okay, so I'm trying to rush through the end of this thing. Okay, we have this weed, which is called the yarrow, and it's native here. And in Zhou Dynasty, they started to use this for divination. 算命的, maybe they tear it apart and see how it's split and so on. I don't know how they do it, but they use it for divination. While before them in Shang, Zhou, okay, in Shang Dynasty, they were using turtle shells and shoulder bones and the other bones for divination. And the next word is tripod. I already talked about. It can be for a camera or for a transit. You could put a transit on top of it. 就是一个测量仪 one person would stand here, the other person would be there, and they would measure how high. Or you have a real estate property and all the properties were surveyed. When you do surveying, you need a tripod with a transit on it. Transit, we talk about transit such as bus and train, but this thing, 测量仪 on top of a tripod is called a transit as well. And this is a ding, and this is for camera, the tripod. And we have flaw, which is a weakness or failing, shortcoming, fault. 一个人的缺点 We have product defect. So the flawed product, we say the product is flawed or has defect. And a person could have character flaw, which means, for example, a father who is partial to one son but not the other. So the two sons would grow up being not happy. That's the father's character flaw. And some people, for example, drinks too much. That is character flaw. So when you write a novel, you want your people to have character flaws to make the story more complicated. If everybody is good and kind, then there's not much of a story to talk about, okay? And this is a book of Kells, in which we learned 3 words: insular, illuminated, and the manuscript. And we have this word, which is usually used, illustrate, which means to add pictures to a book. But when the book is that beautiful, we use the word illuminated instead of illustrate. And here's a word called the filial piety. Oh my God, okay. Filial piety, everyone Chinese would know. It is 孝顺, but no one in the West have heard of this. Almost 99% of English-speaking people, if you ask them what is filial piety, they probably say, oh, I've never heard of this word, because for them, this is nothing. Children don't have to obey their parents as if they were God, okay? But in our culture, filial piety rules everything you do. You have to follow filial piety. But 孝经, we always thought it was written by Zhenzi, but according to what I found, it's probably not true. It's some kind of Confucian scholars early in history. And I really wanted to talk about Li Ma Dou. He was a Jesuit priest. Jesuit is from the Society of Jesus. It is a branch of Catholic Church that came around a little earlier than Li Ma Dou. So it's during the Renaissance. One of the founding figures. He came to China very early on, earlier than almost all other missionaries, and he was with the Jesuit Society of Jesus. And here we have a picture of him painted by a Western painter. And boy, this guy really can write Chinese. Look at all the words in 篆书. It's very good, yeah. And this is Li Ma Dou wearing Chinese costume or garbs or garments. He realized that Chinese have firm belief, Confucian beliefs about heaven and earth and the emperor and the parents and so on and so forth. You cannot just tell them, God, our Christian God is the God, and all those are nonsense. He is going to be chased out of the country if he does that. So he decided that he would wear things that respectable people in China would wear. And he actually communicated with the Pope and got the approval from the Catholic Church that he could do this. And he, in particular, granted Chinese Christians to still worship their ancestors. They, being Christians, they still can worship their parents' shrine in their home or in the temple. This is just totally out of order for everyone else in his church. So people in the Dominican church and the Protestant, all those missionaries thought he was wrong, but he succeeded because of this. So he mixed up with these so-called elite literati. Literati means literary people. When we talk about 竹林七贤啊 or 明朝的比方说文征明啊，还有什么唐伯虎啊 all these people are in a special class. They are literary people first, and they are officials second. So they are exalted in status, and they are called the elite. Elite 就是特别阶级哈。So Mattel Ritchie mingled with these kind of people all the time and wear their dress, their costume, and their dresses or garments, and talk about Confucian philosophy. And that's how he succeeded in this country. And he, instead of saying, your God is not the right God, he says, our God is actually your God. So he calls his God Yahweh, or God. He called him Tianzhu. He called him the God, Deus or deities, Tianzhu, which is a term already in use in China. But by borrowing the word Tianzhu, he's pretending that his God is your God. The God of Abraham is the God of heaven, Lord of heaven. And he also supported the Chinese tradition by agreeing with the veneration of family ancestors, 就是准许中国人来崇拜他们的祖先。At the same time, there are other missionaries from Dominican and Franciscan missionaries. So these are all Tianzhu Catholic Church, the denominations of Catholic Church. There's Society of Jesus, there are Dominicans, and there are Franciscans. They're all in the church, but he succeeded most because he let Chinese converts keep their original faith. And there was a big issue because other Catholic Church denominations, they were jealous that Mattel Ritchie was so successful. So they reported to the Pope saying that, you cannot believe that he let people worship their ancestors as God. And there was a great controversy during Kangxi's time. So this is a big argument that carried on for many, many years. Sometimes the church would savor its relationship with Chinese Christian churches because they are too far off, not obeying the original Catholic rules. Such kind of argument went on and on, off and on, the back and forth. The latest is in 1939, okay? And this Mattel Ritchie, he he was good friend with Xu Guangqi and many other people. And together they translated Euclid's elements of geometry, 几何原本. And he also translated the Confucian classics such as 诗书易礼春秋 into Latin. for the first time in history, the Western people can read about Confucius teachings because of Mattel Ricci. Okay, we're close to the end. This is stanza. It's each paragraph in a song or in a poem is called a stanza. I've introduced this word several times, but I've been using the word paragraph or verses instead of stanza often. And as we adventure into more and more real English poems, we should really use the word stanza. And naked eye is 肉眼, just not using any telescope or microscope or eyeglasses. Just to look with your own eyes is called naked eye. Okay, so here comes my break. It is the song, The Last Rose of Summer, and the poem is written by Thomas More in 1805, and the thing I have has lyrics. Okay. I find this song very hard to learn. The words are not so clear and it twists around and around. Ever since I was a child, I was trying to learn this song, but I never succeeded. So that's that. Okay. Here we read it once over. 'Tis the last rose of summer, left blooming alone. 就是夏日最后的玫瑰哈。Left on the branch, still blooming, but there's no one else. All her lovely companions, that means all the other roses, they're not blooming, they're already faded and gone. No flower of her kindred. Kindred is a relative, very close relative, I would say. Sometimes we use this as a word meaning you're so close together, you have a kindred spirit. That means you feel you are the same family or you're brothers or sisters. So we use the word kindred. No rosebud is nigh. Nigh means near. Here, in order to rhyme this nigh with sign, so you use near, which is an older version of near. Nigh. To reflect back her blushes or give sigh for sigh. This actually is a whole full sentence from No Flowers. No flower of her kind to reflect back her blushes or give sigh for sigh， 就是说她附近没有别的花来让你回忆到记得她的这个美貌，或者是为她叹息的意思哈。So this is the last four line is one sentence, while it can be considered part of the entire sentence. This is the second stanza. I'll not leave thee, thou lone one. Here we have the word thee, which is the old form of you, and thee means you 是这个transitive verb 的受词哈。So it's an object, you, while thou is 主词哈。They are all you in English, but thou is 是说你怎么样怎么样，而 thee 是说我离开你的这个你是一个 thee 哈 ，because it's a object being 被动的哈。I will not leave thee, thou lone one, thou you the lonely one, I will not leave thee to pine on the stem. 现在只有你一朵花了，我不应该再把你留在树枝上面，在那里痛苦的过日子。Since the lovely are sleeping, go sleep thou with them. The lovely means all your companion, 其他的玫瑰花。Since they are sleeping, then he talks to this rose. Since others are sleeping, go sleep thou with them. 你就跟他们一起去睡觉好了哈。Thus kindly I scatter thy leaves over the bed. In order to make you sleep with them, I, out of my kindness, I scatter your leaves over the bed. 我就把你的叶子花都折下来，然后撒在那里哈。Where thy mates of the garden lie scentless and dead. 那就撒在哪里呢？就在一个 bed 上面，这个 bed 就是我们所谓的花床哈 ，a flower bed. Where 现在就在解释 where the bed is. The bed is where your mates of the garden lie scentless and dead. 啊，你过去的朋友现在都已经死了，而且没有味道了，都已经死在那里。While you, I scatter you on them. Okay. Now here comes the third one, which is a little bit tricky. So soon may I follow. I think he means himself. You are the last rose, and I tore you apart and scatter you about, and soon I may follow. when friendships decay 哈，就是说我的朋友如果都或者说我的友谊都不存在的话，我就也会像你一样的死掉了哈。And from love's shining circle, the gems drop away. 本来我们是多么 I don't know. He could mean his girlfriend. He could mean his friends. When we were all together and loving each other, we in a shiny circle. From this circle, the gems drop away. 这个珠宝就从这里掉下去了哈。I think he's saying that the flower is dead and I let it rest with the other roses. And I, my friend, once we were all happy together, will one day die and or be apart and just like the gems, 就珠宝会掉在地上哈。When true hearts lie withered and the fond ones are flown, oh, who would inhabit this bleak world alone? When that happens, I and my friends, my loved ones, we all lie there withered, 都谢了的时候，and 我们所喜欢的人都飞了散开了哈。When such things happen, who would inhabit this bleak world alone? 那到了那个时候，谁还会活在这个寂寞枯萎的世界哈？It's a very, very sad song. He looked at this rose and he decided to just kill it. And he thought about his life and his friends. All the happy days will one day be gone. Okay, but that's not Shu Donghu would say. Okay, this is when I was in school, we learned about this song. And this person used very beautiful words, and the words should match the melody. So this is quite a lovely Chinese poem as well. But of course, many other people attempted to translate it in different ways. Huh? I'll just say a few words about this song. It's a poem by the Irish poet Thomas Moore. He wrote it in 1805 while he was staying in Kilkenny, in a castle in Kilkenny. Most famous Irish towns would have a castle. Kilkenny has more than one castle, where he was said to have been inspired by a specimen of Rosa o' Blush. People say that the rose he was talking about or talking to is a version of, is a specimen of Rosa o' Blush, like this. This is Rosa o' Blush. The poem is set to a traditional tune called The Young Man's Dream. It's an old Irish tune, just like the last one we talked about was actually last two. We had the Tusilia. Oh, that's Ben Jonson. I'm sorry. We had Minstrel Boy. And there's a popular Irish song called the Danny Boy. You must have heard of it. That is a song written by somebody using an old Irish air. AIR is the word for folk song. So this one has it's a new poem written by Thomas Moore, but it's set to the tune of an old Irish tune called The Young Man's Dream. Okay. And famously Ludwig van Beethoven, he wrote two pieces using the same tune. We don't have to know which one, but if you want to know, these are the pieces that contain this song written by Beethoven. And the poem is by Su Shi called Zheng Liu Jing Wen Dong Jing. He's describing a winter scene while he wrote this poem as a gift to his old friend Liu Jingwen. It says, 何尽已无晴雨盖， 菊残犹有傲霜枝。一年好景君须记，最是橙黄橘绿湿。It's looking at a very sad scene. He saw the lotus flowers with its beautiful summer leaves, fragrant leaves, and the flowers, huge blossoms. It's all over. When winter is about to come, there was no flowers. There were no flowers, no lotus flower, and there were no leaves. Famously, lotus flower would have leaves that are shaped like this. It's called a 晴雨盖. So it is a cover. It's an umbrella for people to hold onto the stem to protect them from the rain. It is a very cute way to describe that the lotus leaves are gone. He says the lotus leaf lost their umbrella that protected, that hold off the rain. Okay, so that is a very sad scene. And to add to that, he would describe the chrysanthemum flowers, 菊残. The chrysanthemum flowers were withered and faded, and you could hardly see any flowers left. However, they still proudly hold these frosted branches against this cold wind, I suppose. So he, in 2 sentences, he comes from the very sad situation with the lotus flowers losing everything to the defiant gesture of chrysanthemum flowers who still stick around with their proud, defiant, frosted branches. And what is he talking about? He's talking about his friend and himself. They are all over 55 years old, and they're going into their old age, and all their brightest days were behind them. However, Sushi being Sushi, he is not going to end there. He would say, 一年好景君须记，最是橙黄橘绿湿. That is, despite everything that you see, despite all our best years are behind us, you should always remember the best time of the year is winter, when oranges are turning orange color. That's the most fruitful year, when you harvest wonderful fruits in the dead of winter. Okay, it's a very short one, but it shows Sushi's high spirit very well. It was written in 1090. He was good friend with Liu Jisun, and he wrote some kind of petition to the emperor recommending Liu Jisun, saying he was so capable and worthy, and he should be promoted. At the same time, he wrote this poem as a gift to Liu Jisun, who is Liu Jisun. Okay, we have his name, Liu Jingwen. Every Chinese, especially a literary person, would have more than one name. You would encounter different names for the same person. Here we look at his name, Liu Jisun, which means he is the last son of his parent, with his middle name Ji, which means the third or the last. Okay. So Liu Jisun was 58 years old and Su Shi was 55. And both of them were at an age that they felt the best years were behind them. So he first described to them life is like the end of summer, with the lotus and the chrysanthemum all struggling while they die. But the last 2 lines says, even though it is a bad time, you would harvest, and you face this most wonderful time of the year because of oranges being harvested by the farmers. So even though people at age 55 or 58 saw their best years going away, but this is when it's the most fruitful time. They should all be optimistic, 就是乐观的意思哈。Let me put this one somewhere. He is forever optimistic. Optimistic, huh? The orange tree is similar to pine tree and the cedar tree and cypress and all these evergreen trees. They were valued by Chinese people, especially the literary people, as being truthful and persistent and consistent and reliable. And the oranges especially for being fruitful. I think Chinese people are probably unique in that they always treasure those natural plants and trees and flowers for their virtue. To Western people, there's nothing virtuous about a tree or a flower, but we just love all these like bamboo or pine or apricot, Chinese apricot blooms in the winter. These are wonderful things that we treasure in a flower or a plant. Well, this is it, but I would like to talk a little bit about cicada because I heard about it recently on the radio, because this is that time of the year. This every 17 years, the cicadas would come up. Cicada like this is probably an annual cicada. We in Taiwan, we are so familiar with it. I haven't been to Taiwan in summer for many years. Do they still have lots of cicadas? Because I know when I was a child, we saw a lightning bug or we see them all the time, but now they are very rare. I wonder if we still have so many cicadas in the summer. They were so loud, huh? But those are annual cicadas. I'm going to talk to you about cicada because there is a kind of cicada that comes up every 17 years. There are 3,000 kinds of cicadas in the world. And they have big eyes, they set wide apart, they have very short antenna, 触角很短, and their front wing, I guess they have two pairs of wings, and the front pair is membranous, which means it's transparent. You could only see the veins, 中间有黑线, but still you can see through the wings. It's very special, like dragonflies, but different from butterflies or moths. They have exceptionally loud sound. When they sing, it's so loud you could not hear anything else. They have this strange kind of anatomy part of their body that could make such a loud drum-like timbals. Okay, I don't know how it works. The extant species occur all around the world. There are many kinds of cicadas in the world, both in temperate climates and the tropical climate. 热带跟温带都有. They typically live in trees and laying their eggs in a slit in the bark. Here's a picture of the slits in the bark where cicadas lay their eggs in. I've never noticed it. In all my life, when I heard cicada singing loudly, I never even attempted to get some of the shells, 蝉壳. Lots of people put a stick with some, how do you say that, tar on the top of a stick and try to stick the live cicadas, or they pick up the empty shells from the trees. But I never bothered to look for their eggs in the slit of the branches. Something new to me. So these are annual cicadas. They may come back every year or every 2 years, 3 years, or many years they would come up once. However, they are all scattered about. So every year there are some of them alive that you could hear. So you thought that they were always there every summer. You rely on cicadas to be singing loudly every summer, year after year. Okay, that's called annual cicadas. And here it says some Shandong people would eat their cicadas are eaten by humans in various countries, including Shandong. This one is deep fried. It's like 蚕茧, silkworm pupae. They are deep fried. And cicadas were mentioned by Homer's Iliad. 在荷马的史诗里面就有这个蚕的事. And also in the paintings, in Shang Dynasty paintings. So it's people think they are carefree. They live so carefree. They just loudly sing all the time. And they seem to be immortal, immortality. So in literature, they're described as being carefree and immortal, but actually they are not. Okay. Here I have a 骆宾王在狱永禅. He was in prison, 骆宾王, Tang Dynasty poet, and he said, 西路禅声唱, 南关客思声. Of course, he's very sad when he listened to that chant. 哪堪玄鬓影来对白头吟. He thought about this chant as being so with black hair, but of course it doesn't have hair. 玄鬓 means the sideburn is totally black, while he himself, he was 44 years old, and his hair is white. 路中非难进，风多响一尘. He's describing that the Chan could not, actually he's describing himself. He was, there's a heavy dewdrop on the cicada, so he could not fly away. And it's so windy that okay, I don't know. Let's forget about what the arrow message is. It's so windy, and the loud voice is blurred by the wind. So he's having pity on these cicadas. And he thought about himself. Nobody believed that he was not a criminal. So how could he express his thoughts to others? So the last thing we're talking about is periodical cicadas. And here we have a map. Oops. Oh my God, I lost the map. Can you see this map? The arrow message on the computer says they could not reach this map. So you look at this map on the left-hand side. This is a map of Eastern America. And here we have from north to south and to maybe to Mississippi River, somewhere a little west of it. There are many, many kinds of periodical cicadas. They are called brood 1, brood 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and until 20 something. There are 22, 23. They are all different kinds. but they are either the 17-year one or the 13-year one. So in different years, one kind of this brood of cicada would appear. And when I lived in New York on Long Island, we had that yellow colored one, which is called the brood 10. So the reason I read about it in the news is because brood 10 is about to appear this year after 17 years staying underground. Isn't that a marvelous thing? They just went underground and stayed there for 17 years, and they all came up at the same time. And in millions and millions, and in 4 or 5 weeks, they would all be dead and dropped on the ground. So if you live in those areas, you would be able to see and hear them for a very short time. They live a little bit over 17 years. When they were hatched, they go down into the ground and they come up 17 years later. And they sing and they mate and they lay eggs and then they die. That's a fantastic story to me, okay? Okay, we cannot see this picture either, which is a cicada with the shell. The shell is called the exuviae. Okay, so cicada has a 蝉壳 from which they emerge. Okay, that's all I have to say today. Okay, thank you very much. Do you have anything to say?
Thank you. It's a lot.
Yeah, I thought it is a short one. You see, I only had 68. I usually have 100. That's why I was trying to talk a little more and then I talk too much. Next time I'll just not talk so much. Okay.
谢谢老师。
谢谢老
Yeah.
师，
客气，
谢谢老师，
谢谢，
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 拜拜。
拜。
拜。Okay, I cannot do this. Okay. I am going to say, okay. Am I still there? Stop share, okay.